Welcome to Scandal and Silk Tailies, where secrets unravel and the forbidden becomes irresistible. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and share your thoughts in the comments and keep up with our latest hot stories. It had been a while since I had seen Sophie, my best friend. Life had swept us both in different directions, and we hadn't found the time to catch up in what felt like ages. So when she called me one Wednesday evening suggesting we meet up for a quiet dinner, I didn't hesitate to say yes. We picked a cozy restaurant just around the corner from my apartment, one we used to frequent back in college, full of nostalgic memories. I arrived first, settling into a corner booth with a warm cup of tea, my mind wandering back to all the times Sophie and I had spent together, long nights chatting about our dreams, our fears, our relationships, and everything in between. She was my rock, the one person who knew me better than anyone else. When Sophie walked in, I stood to greet her with a big hug. She looked as radiant as always, her smile lighting up the room. But there was something different about her tonight, something I couldn't quite put my finger on. As we sat down, she quickly brushed off my inquiry about her day, saying, "Oh, just a little tired, nothing too special." But the tension in her voice made me wonder if there was more beneath the surface. After a few moments of catching up, the conversation shifted. She began to talk about her husband, Matt, and I couldn't help but notice the slight sadness in her eyes as she mentioned his name. "I just feel like he's been distant lately," she confessed, pushing her food around on her plate. "I don't know if it's work or something else, but I miss the closeness we used to share." My heart ached for her. Sophie and Matt had always seemed like the perfect couple, the kind of pair everyone admired. I couldn't fathom why she would feel this way. I reached across the table, taking her hand in mine. "Maybe it's just a phase, Sophie," I said softly. "You two have been through so much together. Sometimes life just gets in the way." She nodded, though her expression remained distant. "I hope so. But it's like there's a wall between us now, and I can't seem to break it down." We spent the rest of the evening talking about everything and nothing, just like we always had, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something was weighing on her. I couldn't help but feel concerned. Sophie deserved happiness, and I wanted to help her find it. The next few weeks were a blur of routine, but I couldn't shake Sophie's words from my mind. I knew she was hurting, and I wanted to be there for her in any way I could, so I decided to check in on her more often. We started spending evenings together, watching movies, grabbing coffee, and talking about anything that could take her mind off the growing distance between her and Matt. One night, Sophie invited me over to her place for a casual dinner. Matt was out with friends, and I could sense the relief in her voice when she mentioned it. She seemed more at ease when it was just the two of us, and I could see the lightness return to her eyes dot as we ate and laughed together. Matt's absence seemed to give her the space to breathe. The evening felt easy, comfortable, just like old times. But as the night wore on, something unexpected happened. I was sitting on the couch, a glass of wine in hand, when Sophie excused herself to check on something in the kitchen. I settled deeper into the couch, letting my mind wander. That's when I heard the soft click of the door behind me. I turned to find Matt standing in the doorway, his expression thoughtful. "Hey," he said, his voice low, almost hesitant. "I didn't realize you were here tonight." I smiled, trying to ease the awkwardness of the moment. "Just visiting with Sophie." "You guys have been pretty busy lately, huh?" Matt nodded slowly, running a hand through his hair. "Yeah, work's been insane. I feel like I haven't had time for anything or anyone." There was a pause and unspoken understanding between us. I could see the exhaustion in his eyes, the weight of whatever had been keeping him distant from Sophie. I didn't want to pry, but I also knew that something needed to change for the sake of both of them. "Well, maybe you should make some time," I said gently, looking him in the eyes. "Sophie's a good person, Matt. She deserves to feel seen, to feel heard. You can't let the distance grow any wider." He stared at me for a long moment, and I could see the conflict in his gaze. But before he could respond, Sophie re-entered the room, her smile bright as always. The moment passed, and the atmosphere shifted back to the comfortable familiarity of old friends. That night, I went home with a strange sense of unease in my chest. I had said what I needed to say to Matt, but I couldn't shake the feeling that there was more I wasn't seeing. I cared about Sophie and I didn't want to see her heartbroken. But I couldn't force Matt to change. A week later, Sophie called me, her voice shaky. "Can you come over? I need to talk." When I arrived at her apartment, I found her sitting on the couch, her hands wringing together. Matt wasn't home yet, but I could tell from the way Sophie was sitting that she had made a decision. "Matt and I had a talk last night," she said, her voice trembling. "I told him how I've been feeling, how I've missed him, and he listened." He actually listened? My heart swelled with relief. "That's good, Sophie." "I'm so glad you guys talked." Sophie nodded, but there was something else in her eyes. "I think we're going to be okay. He's going to try harder, and I'll try too, but I don't know if it's enough." I felt a tightness in my chest. "What do you mean?" Sophie looked at me, her eyes wide. "I don't know if I can get back to where we were. There's been too much distance. It's like we're two different people now, living in the same house." I didn't know how to respond. I wanted to tell her that everything would be fine, that they would find their way back to each other. But deep down, I knew that relationships were complicated and sometimes love wasn't enough to overcome the hurt that had been left behind. Sophie wiped away a tear and smiled weakly. "I just need time to figure things out, but I'll be okay. I just needed to talk to someone who understands." I wrapped my arms around her, holding her close. "I'm here for you, Sophie. Whatever happens, you're not alone." The next few months were a turning point for both Sophie and Matt. They worked through their issues, slowly but steadily, finding a new way to communicate and connect. I saw a change in Sophie. She was stronger, more confident, and more at peace with herself. And while her relationship with Matt had its ups and downs, it felt like they were on a new path, one that was based on honesty and openness. As for me, I had learned a lot about love and friendship. I had learned that sometimes the best thing you can do for someone is to be there, to listen, and to give them the space they need to heal. And I realized that no matter what happened, I would always be there for Sophie, through the highs and the lows. And when I finally found my own love, I knew it would be built on the same principles of patience, understanding, and genuine connection. Just as Sophie and Matt had worked through their challenges, I knew that I could navigate whatever came my way with the support of the people I cared about most. How much I was hurting you by not being there. I'm sorry, Sophie. I never wanted to lose what we had, but I think I've been afraid of facing the truth. Sophie sat quietly, processing his words. Her eyes were glassy, but there was a sense of relief in her posture, as if finally hearing Matt acknowledge their distance allowed her to breathe again. "It's not just about you, Matt," she said, her voice softer now but still firm. "It's about both of us. I've been trying so hard to make things work, to hold on to something that's slipping away. But I need to be honest with myself, and with you. I don't feel like we're the same people anymore, and it hurts so much to admit that." The silence in the room hung heavy, but it was different from the previous tension. It was a raw, vulnerable silence that allowed both of them to reflect on what had brought them here. "Are you saying that we're over?" Matt's voice broke, the silence barely above a whisper. Sophie shook her head slowly, her eyes filled with a mixture of sadness and clarity. "I don't know yet, Matt, but we can't go on like this. We need space to figure out who we are without pretending we're still the same couple we used to be." Matt looked devastated, his face etched with regret, but also a hint of understanding. "I don't want to lose you, Sophie, but I understand if you need to do this. If this is what you need to find yourself again, I'll respect it. I just wish I had done better." Sophie didn't answer immediately. Instead, she took a deep breath, as if making a decision. "I think we both need time," she said. "Time to figure out who we are and what we want. Maybe we've been holding on to something because we're afraid of the unknown. But I can't keep living in fear of what could happen. We need to let go to allow ourselves the freedom to heal. There were no harsh words exchanged, no blame or anger, just the quiet acceptance that things had changed, and that's sometimes. Love wasn't enough to keep two people together if they had grown too far apart. In the weeks that followed, Sophie and Matt lived separately. It wasn't easy and there were moments of doubt, but both of them knew it was the right thing to do. Sophie began to focus more on herself, reconnecting with old hobbies, traveling to new places, and leaning on her friends for support. She had spent so much of her life focusing on Matt, on their shared future, that she had forgotten who she was outside of their relationship. It was time to rediscover that person. I saw the change in Sophie. She was slowly finding her way back to herself, finding joy in things that had once made her feel alive. And while I could see the pain still lingering in her eyes, there was a spark returning, one that hadn't been there for a long time. One evening, we sat on her balcony watching the sun dip below the horizon. She had just returned from a weekend getaway and looked peaceful, as if the time away had cleared her mind and heart. "I feel like I'm finally starting to breathe again," she said, her voice light, but with a depth of emotion behind it. "I've spent so many years worrying about everyone else, about what Matt and I should be, but I've forgotten about me. I don't know what the future holds, but for the first time in a long time, I'm okay with that." I smiled, happy to see her so at ease. "You deserve to feel like this, Sophie. You deserve to find happiness on your own, with or without someone else." She nodded, her eyes gazing out at the fading light. "I don't know what will happen with Matt. I don't even know if we'll get back together. But for now, I need to focus on me, and that's enough." Months passed, and Sophie continued to heal. She and Matt kept in touch occasionally, but the space between them had allowed them both to reflect on their relationship and their own personal growth. They began to talk again, not as a couple, but as two people who had shared a part of their lives and were learning to be individuals once more. One day, Sophie came to me, her eyes bright with a mixture of excitement and nervousness. "I think I'm ready to meet someone new," she said, her voice filled with a cautious optimism. I could see how much she had grown, how far she had come since that evening when we sat in her apartment, talking about the end of her marriage. She wasn't running from the past anymore, but embracing the future. "I'm so proud of you, Sophie," I said, giving her a hug. "You've done the hard work. You've learned so much about yourself, and you deserve the love that's right for you, whatever that looks like." She smiled, a soft and genuine smile. "I think I'm ready to love again. Not because I need to, but because I want to. Because I'm no longer afraid to take that chance." In the months that followed, Sophie began dating again. It wasn't about finding someone to fill the space Matt had left, but about embracing the possibility of a future built on her own terms. She met someone who understood her, who didn't try to change her, but loved her for exactly who she was. Sophie's journey hadn't been easy, but it had led her to a place of clarity and peace. She had learned to love herself first, to embrace her own worth before seeking it in someone else. And in doing so, she had opened her heart to a love that was real, grounded and free of fear. As for Matt, we kept in touch every now and then. He had started his own path to healing, acknowledging his mistakes and the distance that had come between them. But he understood now that sometimes love doesn't look like a perfect union. It's about respect, growth, and the willingness to let go when the time comes. Sophie and Matt didn't end up back together, but they both moved forward, each in their own way. And in the end, that was enough. As the months passed, Sophie continued to evolve, her strength becoming even more apparent. I could see it in the way she carried herself, more confident, more assured, and with a genuine joy in her eyes. While Matt's absence had initially left a void, she was now filling that space with her own growth. She had stopped defining herself by her past and had begun embracing who she was becoming. It was a Sunday morning when I saw Sophie again, this time at a small cafe near my apartment. We had become regulars at this cozy place, and I knew I'd always find her there if I needed to catch up. She was sitting by the window, looking out at the passing traffic, a serene expression on her face as she sipped her coffee. "Hey," I greeted her, sliding into the seat across from her. "How's everything going?" She smiled at me, that familiar warmth spreading across her face. But this time, there was something different about her smile, something fuller. Something that showed she had finally found a sense of peace within herself. "It's good." "Really good," she said, her voice light but purposeful. "I've been focusing on things that make me happy, work, my art, just living for myself." I noticed the small sketchbook that she always carried with her, now open. On the table, she had taken up painting again, a hobby she had abandoned years ago when life had become too busy. Her fingers gently traced the edge of the page, a quiet smile playing on her lips. "You've been painting?" I asked, intrigued. She nodded, her eyes lighting up. "Yeah, it's like rediscovering a part of me I didn't even realize was missing. I never thought I'd have time for this kind of thing again. But now I've learned that it's important to make time for things that make you feel alive." The conversation turned to new beginnings, the excitement of reclaiming passion she had neglected for so long. Sophie shared how she had recently joined an art class, met new people, and even planned a small art show to showcase her work. It was all so different from the woman I had known in the past, the one who had always been consumed by the needs of others. "Do you ever think about how much you've changed?" I asked her, genuinely curious. "I do," she said softly, pausing for a moment before continuing. "I think about it every day. I was so afraid of losing Matt that I forgot who I was. I forgot that I could still be someone outside of our relationship. But now I've learned that I can be both strong in my own right and still capable of loving someone deeply when the time comes." I could feel the wisdom in her words. She had come a long way from the woman who had once clung to a marriage that wasn't working. She had learned to trust in herself, to believe in her own strength, and that was something that no one could take away from her. A few weeks later, Sophie asked me to go with her to the art show she had been preparing for. It was being held in a small local gallery, and I knew how much it meant to her. Her work, full of bright colors and abstract emotions, was finally being seen by others. I could see how much pride she took in her art, and how it symbolized the journey she had been on, the courage to face her fears and embrace the future. I watched as Sophie spoke with people who admired her work, her confidence shining through. She wasn't the same woman who had walked into that cafe months ago, uncertain about where she was headed. This was a new version of Sophie, strong, passionate, and fully in control of her own destiny. As the night wore on, Sophie and I found a quiet corner of the gallery, away from the bustle of the crowd. She looked over at me with a soft smile, her eyes sparkling. "Do you think I've changed?" she asked. I reached over and took her hand in mine, squeezing it gently. "You've always been strong, Sophie," I said, my voice full of warmth. "But now you're not afraid to show it. I'm so proud of you." Her smile deepened, and for a brief moment, I saw the vulnerability beneath the confidence, a vulnerability that spoke of her past struggles and the strength it took to overcome them. "You know," she said thoughtfully, "I think I'm ready for something new. Not necessarily a relationship, but just ... to explore life with an open heart. I'm not afraid of what comes next anymore." I nodded, feeling a sense of peace wash over me as I realized how far she had come. Sophie was not only healing, but she was thriving, taking steps forward, ready for whatever life had to offer her next. As the months rolled by, Matt and Sophie continued to navigate their separation. They spent time apart, reflecting on their relationship and what they had both learned about themselves. There was no animosity between them, only a quiet understanding that sometimes love changes. Sometimes it's just not enough to hold two people together if they're no longer growing in the same direction. And while they were no longer a couple, they'd come to respect the journey they had shared and the people they had become. Sophie eventually met someone new, a man named Alex, who shared her love of art and adventure. Their connection was slow, steady, and based on mutual respect for one another's independence. Alex wasn't trying to fill a void left by Matt. He was simply someone who appreciated Sophie for who she was and supported her in her growth. It was a different kind of love, one that didn't carry the weight of past mistakes, but instead offered a fresh start. I think this is what I needed, Sophie told me one evening as she and Alex enjoyed a quiet dinner at her apartment. Someone who sees me for who I am right now, not who I used to be. Someone who wants to grow with me, not hold me to a past that doesn't define me anymore. As I watched Sophie find love again, this time on her own terms, with someone who valued her independence, I realized just how much she had learned. She had embraced the lessons life had taught her, and in doing so, she had created space for a love that wasn't based on fear or dependency, but on mutual respect, understanding, and growth. Sophie's story wasn't just about love, it was about finding herself, about learning to be whole without needing someone else to complete her. It was about realizing that true love comes from within, and that you have to love yourself before you can truly love someone else. And in that journey, I saw the incredible strength of my best friend. The woman who had fought for love found herself and opened her heart to a future that was finally her own.